and don't use your audio off your computer, and see if that helps.
Well, I'm hearing the internet pop back up and then cuts off. It's just not enough power to sustain it. I don't know if it's going to create more confusion as it already is. Maybe I should just stick with the phone.
Okay, well, we're live. Welcome to the July 7th, 2020 City Council meeting on Zoom. I guess I got to hit the hammer first. Sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Mayor Racy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter.
Here.
Councilman Miller.
Present.
Councilman Webster. I see you.
Here.
Councilman Dowd.
Here.
Councilwoman Skiff.
Here.
Councilman Wagner.
Here.
Quorum is present. So we're going to start the meeting with a moment of silence for Cynthia Gillum, who was my beautiful mother. She was a wonderful lady, and she'll be forever loved and missed. And also for those who have lost their lives to the COVID-19 virus.
Thank you.
Item number 1 on our agenda is to approve the agenda.
Move to approve the adoption.
Or any questions? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter.
Yes.
Councilman Miller.
Yes.
Councilman Webster.
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff.
Yes.
Councilman Wagner.
Yes.
Councilman Dowd.
Yes.
Mayor Racy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 2 is City Council minutes, regular meeting of June 16th, 2020.
Move to approve without exception.
Support, Dowd.
Any questions? Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter.
Yes.
Councilman Miller.
Yes.
Councilman Webster.
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff.
Yes.
Councilman Wagner.
Yes.
Councilman Dowd.
Yes.
Mayor Racy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Public questions regarding items on the agenda.
Okay. Do we have anybody that is in the attendee area that want to ask a question that's on the agenda? If so, please raise your hand in the attendee area. Any questions? Okay, go ahead and move the agenda.
Item number 3 is presentations. 3A, Debt 101, issuing bonds presentation by Baird and Miller Canfield.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is Debt 101, issuing bonds. We have Brian Leffler with Baird, and then we have Tom Collis with Miller Canfield. We're gonna go over discussing why an issuer would want a bond, exploring available borrowing options, and summarizing a timeline and what participants are involved in this.
This is Tom Colas from Miller Canfield. Hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yep, we're good.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So just briefly, I'll take us through the first few slides, and then Brian will pick up and take us through kind of the last 2/3 of the presentation, and then we'll have time for questions. Hopefully, address any questions that are on the presentation. So this is a general, presentation on how to issue debt and why communities issue debt for what purposes. So we're kind of looking at this at the 30,000 foot level. We obviously can spend a lot more time getting into more detail to the extent there's a desire to do so. So initially, the real question is, well, why borrow money? And the simple answer is, for certain public improvements that require a substantial amount of funds at the onset, a lot of communities don't have either those funds set aside and available to pay those, or they want to take advantage of really, very economical times and good interest rates and kind of save money for other purposes, rainy day funds and the like, and fund balances. So typically you're borrowing money for certain types of categories of things. Mostly it's public improvements. So that can be buildings, city hall, police stations, fire stations, road infrastructure, roads, water, sewer. Some communities have their own electric utility systems. And then there's also kind of things that improve the quality of life of your residents, like recreation centers and playgrounds and pools. And then fundamentally, issues with respect to, your DPW. So whether it's equipment for the DPW or fire trucks or police vehicles, IT equipment, that can all be borrowed, financed, because those are capital items. So most of the debt that's issued by municipalities is issued for capital purposes. There are some exceptions where you can actually issue for working capital, borrowing purposes for funding cash flow deficits. So there are certain situations where just because of the timing as to when taxes are levied and collected and when payments are made, certain communities actually borrow based on the anticipation of taxes coming due. We may see more of that this year, depending on what legislation gets passed with respect to deferment of taxes potentially, and just based on the anticipated delay in actually collecting certain taxes, just as taxpayers might not be in a position to pay their taxes on a timely basis. So that is something that can also be looked at from a working capital perspective. Another thing to also look at is refinancing outstanding debt. So later in the agenda, we actually will consider a resolution that will do just that purpose, authorize the refinancing of existing debt. So if you think about when we're issuing debt for capital purposes, we're typically issuing it to cover a decent amount of the useful life of the asset we're financing. So that can be outstanding for 20, sometimes 30 years, because if you're building a building, it's got a long useful life. Obviously, if we were doing a road project, that would have a shorter useful life, particularly here in Michigan. We probably wouldn't go beyond 15 years for a road project. But nevertheless, the way that most of the debt is structured, and not just the city's debt, but most debt out in the market, it provides the opportunity to be able to refinance if certain conditions are there. In essence, if the interest rate wow.
Okay.
Okay. So just, again, back to refinancing outstanding debt, really two reasons you do that. One is to basically reduce the debt service on that particular debt. So issue refunding bonds, eliminate the existing bonds, hopefully put in lower interest rates, and save on your annual debt service costs. Another way of looking at refinancing debt is actually restructuring the annual debt service. And there are various ways of how to do that. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on refundings as to some of the requirements you need to look at when you're looking at refinancing outstanding debt. So typically typically that's why communities borrow money, because they don't have the funds sitting on hand to pay for these projects on a pay-as-you-go basis. You might do more of your maintenance type projects on a pay-as-you-go, but if you have a big capital project that you need funds up front, most communities will borrow money for that purpose. So moving to the next slide. So what is a municipal bond? Very simply, it's a security. It's a debt security, and it evidences the city's obligation to repay that borrowing. So there's actually a bond that gets prepared, that we actually prepare that as your bond counsel, that is ultimately delivered to the bondholder or an agent of the bondholder that says the city promises to pay debt service on the bonds pursuant to the schedule that's been prepared and agreed to at a certain interest rate. And the bond itself actually has the details of the bonds. When is it payable? What's the security behind it? Can the bonds be called early for redemption? Those types of things. And a debt is issued pursuant to state law. So the city is a creature of the state. It's created by the state. The city is a home rule city. You have a city charter. So within those state law and charter provisions is the ability to actually issue debt. So when we look to issue debt, we have to find a state law that authorizes us to do so. So there are dozens of state laws that authorize a city like yourselves to actually issue debt for various purposes. And then that actually will provide the structure or the process of how that debt gets issued. For example, do you have to publish a notice beforehand? Is there a right of referendum associated with issuing a certain type of bond? And it has the process as to how you have to follow through that to actually issue the debt. And state law has a limitation as to how much debt any community could have outstanding at any particular time. So that's actually set forth in the Home Rule City Act. In charter provisions, you can sometimes have a similar charter provision, but most charter provisions say that the city is authorized to issue debt up to the maximum amount authorized by law. So when we're looking at issuing debt, we're looking at what's our state law authority to do so, how does that fit within the city charter, and then what's the process for doing that. So one of the fundamental questions that gets asked in the very beginning is, well, how are you going to pay this back? So what source of revenue, what source or sources of revenue are you going to use to repay your debt? There are a number of different available sources, depending upon what type of debt you're issuing and for what purpose you're issuing the debt. So here are a number of them that are kind of listed on this page 4 of the presentation. A dedicated property tax levy. A perfect example is take how most schools issue their debt. When you go to the polling places and you see a school issue on a ballot, it actually is a lot of times it's a bond proposal that says, shall the school district be authorized to issue bonds in a certain amount for a certain purpose? With that comes the ability to not only issue the bonds, but to levy a separate dedicated tax to repay that debt. That's outside of any charter limitations. Now, schools don't have any charters. They have debt limitations, but the city could also vote a bond issue, put a bond proposal in front of the electorate. If it gets approved, you can issue those bonds and then levy a separate debt levy to pay those taxes. Pay debt service on those bonds, I should say. Another source of revenues is the general fund. So out of your existing millage that you collect as part of your charter millage, you could annually be setting aside funds for either projects on a pay-as-you-go basis or for debt service on debt issued for various projects, capital improvement projects that the city wants to undertake. There's also, I'll just hit the highlight ones. Utility revenues are also one that we see a lot. So your water and sewer systems, a lot of times their bonds are issued to support improvements to those systems, and what's pledged to support them are revenues of the system. But you can also pledge general fund revenues to support those. So for example, the city has a number of bond issues outstanding that were done for water and sewer system improvements. While the security for those bonds is the general fund, the repayment is the revenues of the systems to support those. So there can be a disconnect. State law authorizes you to have what's the security for the bonds, and then two, you could have a different repayment source. But ultimately, the bonds could be backed by the general fund in those circumstances, even though you're using one or more additional funds to support debt service on those bonds. So another if you have the category of other lawfully available funds, the city could also pledge for certain types of bonds, particularly road bonds, its collection of Act 51 monies, the Michigan Transportation Fund revenues that it receives from the state. The city actually has a bond issue that's outstanding that was issued in 2008, that the primary security on those bonds is the Act 51 monies that the city receives. So state law has a process as to how you issue bonds for those purposes and how you repay that debt. So that's a general idea as to the various levels of how we can issue debt, how we can repay it. Another thing you could also think about is the DDA. If you have, to the extent you collect DDA funds and there's projects to finance within the DDA district, the city can issue debt that pledges those tax increment revenues. So that's another potential source for certain types of projects that would qualify under the DDA Act for financing. So just things to think about from the various pools of money that the city might have available. Again, not all revenue sources are available to cover all types of debt. So we have to think about each time you're issuing debt, what's its purpose, what's its security, and what sources of funds are we utilizing to repay that debt. That's just kind of a general idea of what's out there. So when it comes to
Tom?
Yes, go ahead.
I got a question for you. Do you have this up on your screen, the presentation?
I have it on my own screen. I don't have it on the. You mean from a sharing perspective?
I didn't know if you could share it on that the public could see it. I just figured I'd ask.
I don't know if Lisa, do you know if you have this up? If this is up on it's in the.
No, we wanted to present it, Mayor, first, and then we will load it up to the website.
Okay, I didn't know if, he could actually, there's a way to do it through Zoom that he could actually be talking in the screen. You could actually share your computer that we could see his presentation. That's all I was thinking.
Can we try that?
No, you can keep going. No, can we actually just get through it, John, and then we can post it, Mayor?
I just thought it would be easier for the public that don't see it if he was able to do it, but if it's too complicated, I didn't know if he had it sitting there right there.
I have it up. I have 3 screens up. I'm not sure how I would share it.
Okay, that's fine. I just thought I'd ask.
Sorry, Mayor.
Well, we'll make sure to load it onto the finance website once the presentation's over, Mayor.
Okay.
And then if the public has questions, they can certainly, contact us or Katie if they have specific questions.
Great. So moving on. So basically, the basic parties associated with the bond issue. So. Almost all transactions you're going to have a municipal advisor. That would be somebody like Brian Leffler, who's on the phone with us here from Robert W. Baird. Bond counsel, that's my role in the transactions. Miller Canfield, a law firm that actually does the documentation associated with that. And we use the term underwriter, but the purchaser of the bonds. Again, so who's going to buy these bonds? And that can be a number of different parties that Brian will talk about more specifically. But depending upon the type of transaction, you may often have additional participants that are part of a deal. For example, if we're doing a refunding bond issue where we're paying off existing bonds and putting new bonds in their place, depending upon the timing as to when those existing bonds can be paid, we might be using the new money, the refunding bond process, and putting them into an escrow. And they're held there exclusively to pay the prior bondholders. So we actually hire an escrow agent, which is typically a corporate trust department of a bank that actually acts as an escrow agent, holds an escrow account, and utilizes those funds to pay the prior bondholders. Same with if we're looking at issuing bonds, sometimes we might, in addition to the city's obligation to repay debt, the city may look at actually buying bond insurance as an additional security for the bondholder. What that does is kind of what it sounds like, right? We buy insurance so that to the extent the city's unable to make a payment, the bond insurer would actually make the payment to the bondholder. So it kind of steps up and covers any shortfalls that the city doesn't make. Now the city's still obligated to make those payments and make those to the bond insurer, but it's additional security to the bondholder. And what it does is it allows hopefully a lower interest rate on the bonds because the bondholder feels more secure. In addition, depending upon the size of the deal, So anything that's typically over $1 million, but if it's certainly required if the deal's over $5 million and we're issuing the bonds out to the market, the state requires you to actually have a rating agency independently rate bonds themselves. So that's a rating agency is typically one of the companies like Moody's or Standard & Poor's or Fitch. They're the three kind of independent companies that will actually rate the likelihood of an issuer repaying their bonds. And they assign letter ratings to them. Obviously, AAA ratings are the top ratings. You get down to AA, single A, and then into the B categories for ratings. And that really, it just tells the bondholder, the likelihood of their repayment. Obviously, the higher the rating, the more likely they're going to get repaid, so the greater comfort they have. So typically the lower the interest rate of the bonds. And just a couple other roles that sometimes, so if we have an investment banking firm that we're using as your underwriter, they're the ones that are actually buying the bonds. They might have their own counsel that's part of the transaction, so you might have underwriters counsel on the transaction. Also, the city might have its own independent counsel that assists with the disclosure document that we're using, the offering document that we might be using to actually sell the bonds out in the market. Now, in certain transactions, bond counsel will cover that role also. And then finally, the city doesn't actually make payments directly to individual bondholders. It actually makes them to a paying agent, a corporate trust department, for example. Kind of like your escrow agent for paying prior bondholders. The new bondholders would have a paying agent where you'd make your payment to them, and then they make the payments through a company that ultimately gets paid to the bondholders. Those are your typical kind of participants in a transaction. I'm going to give you just a little bit in depth more of the bond counsel role, my role in a transaction. So what we do with our issuers is basically evaluate the different financing options. What does state law allow you to borrow, and under what circumstances can you borrow? Our main role is to issue an opinion, an unqualified opinion that says the bonds are legal and valid and binding obligations of the city and exempt from federal and state income taxes, so that the bondholder can rely upon that when they're making an investment. So the whole role of bond counsel came out of the early 1900s because cities were issuing debt without actually having independent counsel review that, and some cities were defaulting on it because they weren't properly authorized. So the market really demands an opinion from independent counsel that reviews this information and provides that opinion. And to give an unqualified opinion, we have to make sure that all the proceedings have been properly followed. So that is why we actually draft the proceedings for the city. So any resolution that you would entertain, like the one that's coming up in the agenda later today or this evening, is something that we would draft. Any of the notices, bond authorizing resolutions and the like, we would actually draft those and put those in front of council and answer any questions associated with that. So I'm going to flip this over to Brian now, who's going to go through the municipal advisor or financial advisor's roles.
Thanks, Tom. I'm assuming everybody can hear me. I'm on page 7 of the presentation about municipal advisor, and it's good to see most of you. Was on a prior Zoom call when Baird was selected as the city's municipal advisor through an RFP process. And during this, essentially, is we are giving you essentially the financial advice as to for your consideration. And it is our duty to essentially provide you options for your consideration. Essentially, we do have a fiduciary duty to the city. In other words, the city's interests are our interest. And that our goal here is always make sure that you know your different options and that you have the information to make those options. You don't have to take our advice, but you have to receive it in terms of to make the best decision. The other thing that we do is Tom talked about the resolution on the prior page. Some of the parameters that are within inside that resolution, Baird essentially put that together. And we, as you go through the resolution later tonight, we can certainly answer any questions that you may have at that time. One of the things that we do is we could select other members of the financing team. Tom talked about an underwriter, and for those that already may know is that there is currently a request for proposals for underwriters that are essentially is out there. The responses are due next week. Baird will essentially summarize those proposals received and give a recommendation to the city as to which underwriter is essentially going to meet the city's needs. Things like, do they have experience working with municipalities in Michigan? Do they have the ability to sell bonds that are essentially in Michigan based on the certain type of rating? What is their recommendation in terms of structure? How would they approach the credit rating agencies with the city as a partner? And then also there is going to be a disclosure document. We call it an official statement. So Baird would be assisting the city to draft primarily the economic and financial information about the city. We call it the Appendix A, and that's actually being done right now. And we're working closely with your administration to make sure that we update it. As you can imagine, we're in the crossroads of going from fiscal year end 2020 to now fiscal year end 2021. New tax bills went out here in July 1. So we're just making sure we have the most recent information inside that document. Turning on to the next page, page 8, as Tom mentioned on the underwriters, essentially, this is essentially the purchaser that buys the entire bond issue, and then through their brokerage network or their own portfolio, they will essentially sell and break the bond issue into $5,000 denominations. And they can sell it to individuals, or they can sell it to institutions. And the whole point of the underwriter, there are rules in our industry, and that they must deal fairly with all persons and make sure that the price is fair. And then also, once they are formally engaged, they essentially can provide some financial information to Baird and to the city as required under the rules of our industry, to make sure they're going to make recommendations. Should you buy municipal bond insurance? What kind of benefit would it give to the city in terms of lowering your interest costs? But once they make that type of presentation or proposal to the city, it is Baird's responsibility to say, yes, that's true, that we agree to those projected savings amount, or we would actually give you some type of advice that, to the contrary of that. They'll also talk about the structure. As Tom had mentioned too, is that as he's doing his legal opinion, they're going to make sure that the legal opinion's in place. You have approval from the Michigan Department of Treasury. They're going to want to make sure that the rating strategy meets their needs as well. And they also provide some guidance on the official statement. And then more often than not, when the official statement or preliminary official statements in the marketplace, it's usually out there for at least a week to 10 days to make sure they generate the interest that is necessary so that the entire issue is sold. The underwriter, as you can imagine on most products, whether it's financial or even just a plain commodity, the underwriter is supposed to buy all the bonds. And at the day that they essentially buy them, they may not have them all sold, and that's okay, but that's the risk they will take when they buy the bonds. And so what we wanted to make sure on that is that when they do buy it, it's at the right and fair price. And Miller Canfield will prepare an issue price certificate or some type of a compliance certificate to make sure that they complied with the rules. Turning to page 9, I thought Tom did a pretty good job about the other deal participants in terms of all the different players that could be on a transaction. And so there's narrative around each of these pinwheels, but these pie shapes. So if an underwriter is selected, there's going to be another, they pay for their own counsel. So that's on the far right-hand side, underwriters counsel. The rating agency issue is that Michigan statute does require a bond rating, and that's under Act 34 for any transaction. In the event that we don't need a bond rating, i.e. sometimes some purchasers say we don't need a bond rating, we're going to have to ask for a waiver of that requirement under state statute. And the resolution authorizes that option in the event that that comes to fruition for this transaction. But I think what Tom had done earlier in the presentation, he did a good job to explain every role of the participants in this pinwheel. Turning to page 10, there's a bond calendar. So one of the things I think like everybody likes to have is a measured pace. I don't do well with crises management. We always like to move at like we know where we have to get at the end of the road. But what we do is Baird has prepared a calendar talks about all the steps that we see that is going to happen, who is going to be responsible for that. And essentially, we've been working with a working group already to say, these are the things that are coming in the next week to 10 days, and everybody sees and works together. And so one of the things in terms of the other considerations, we talk about final cost for the projects. What we're proposing is a refinancing. We kind of know what that final cost is. We have to essentially put enough money into an escrow account to pay off the old obligation, and that the new debt service is what was going to be presented to you to pay in the future, and that the difference between the old debt service and the new debt service should be lower. In other words, there should be savings. And Public Act 34 also requires that for you to issue bonds for refinancing purposes, that you have net set present value savings after you pay your cost of issuance. So we have to make sure that we comply with state law, and that's another function that Tom will be making sure we comply with. Timing of proceeds, all these other questions here are just basic considerations as we go through a bond calendar. If any of these apply, we actually put it into the time schedule of events. Turning to page 11, this is kind of a graphic depiction of that time schedule. As you can see, it's about a 12-week process. So we have a kickoff call, make sure everybody knows who's doing what. We talk about that schedule of events. We talk about bond documentation. So, what the whole important thing here is that some things are being done at the same time. So it's not always just a linear progression. Some of the things we're multitasking so that we get together on this on a timely basis. And so you can see that what is necessary prior to the marketing of the bonds, there's got to be a bond rating, which essentially complies with state law. There's also could be a call with the rating agencies prior to getting the bond rating, but then we're preparing documents to give to a bond rating or a bond insurer that essentially meet their needs to get some feedback from them. Turning to page 12, there's two types of sale in Michigan. One's a negotiated sale where all the parties, including the underwriter, are hired up front. And this is the path that we're proceeding on. And that the underwriter, essentially, as we mentioned, will submit a proposal. There will be an evaluation and a recommendation to the administration. The underwriter will negotiate a fair price. So we're going to know up front what they're going to propose to charge, and then that's incorporated into our analysis. And as I mentioned earlier, the underwriter buys all the bonds and they take the risk and they have to sell it. So more often than not, they sell essentially most of the transaction prior to signing that bond purchase agreement. So normally you may see 10% unsold, but more often than not, most of the bond issue is sold. Now, the competitive sale is one you may have had experience in the past where the transaction is complete, it's put out for a sealed bid out in the open market. One of the reasons that we've asked here, given the market, as you probably saw in the early part of the pandemic, the market just kind of went crazy. And in the sense, there was a lot of illiquidity in the market. And I can share with you, working with the Miller Canfield law firm, we actually had a transaction that was set to sell via competitive sale on March 24th. We canceled the sale. We had to postpone it. We didn't do it until May. What we ended up having to do is we actually had to print another notice of sale, additional costs. So I think what the concern is that to make sure that as we're going into the marketplace, I think it's going to be, and Bear would say it's in your best interest to go down the path of a negotiated sale. You're going to know what the underwriter is going to charge up front. That's because of through that RFP process, and that's going to essentially be transparency for you and your taxpayers. Turning to page 13, when you go into an underwriter, what they're trying to do is how do they come up with the interest rates that they're going to put on the bonds and essentially generate the savings that for refinancing of your outstanding debt. So on the right-hand side, let's talk about who's buying these municipal bonds. And you can see majority of it is really individuals. That hasn't changed. And post the 2017 Tax Reform Act, individuals are essentially a bigger buyer of bonds today. Given the fact like banks, since their corporate tax rate went down, the value of owning a tax-free bond by, say, a commercial bank is less today than it was prior to 2017. The other thing is on the left-hand side, there's a couple bubbles there, is how long is this bond issue? So if it's a bond issue that's in, say, 0 to 10 years, you may find trust companies who are essentially managing other people's money is going to be that purchaser because they're trying to manage outflows over the next 5 to 10 years. If there's a bond issue that's much longer, say in the 30 years, you may have household names like Franklin Funds or Putnam Funds that may be purchasers because they like to buy they have a longer view. So essentially you're just trying to match your bond issue to the needs of the different types of investor. The other thing that plays into it is what is the bond rating? If there's bond insurance, what's going on in the economy? And then what's going on is probably the things that we're going to have to disclose, as we all know. We essentially saw the transaction or the agreement with the governor and the legislature for what may happen on revenue sharing, which is essentially going to impact the city and every city in the state. And as we go forward, what's going to happen in the state's next fiscal year, which is going to impact your fiscal year as well. That's still being negotiated. That has not started. Turning to page 14, how do you gauge your success? Did you get your money? Yes, you have to. Was it, how did it work on that calendar? Was it a market rate? One of the things that when we work with this underwriter, we actually have other comparables. So we essentially provide a summary of saying the interest rates that the underwriter is offering to buy your bonds at are competitive compared to the other transaction in the marketplace, either in Michigan or outside of the state. So we essentially look at other transactions prior to giving a written recommendation to the administration. The issue of local investments, underwriters are essentially in this RFP, they're going to be telling us how they're planning to market your bonds. I hope that in the case, the ones that are going to say we're going to be dialing for dollars within Southeast Michigan, that's going to be very important. And then also meet your financial objectives. To me, that's essentially, did you get your savings that you're essentially looking for? And if there are other obstacles, everything's going to have an obstacle. We're just going to make sure that how do we navigate that and have plan B ready to go. With that, I'm going to turn it over back to Tom Colas, and this is essentially what's the next step is why we're leading you up to what we're proposing here for tonight for your consideration. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Brian. Again, later on the agenda is consideration of the resolution that authorizes issuance of refunding bonds. So this is kind of a snapshot of what's actually in that resolution. So the city has a number of outstanding bond obligations, all of which are supported by its limited tax general obligation. So now you may be utilizing, again, remember the discussion beforehand, the security is the limited tax general obligation of the city. You may be utilizing certain other funds, like water and sewer, to finance, to pay debt service on certain types of those bonds. But essentially, since they all have the same security, we can refund them collectively and actually put one or more series in place of the 5 series that are already outstanding. So if approved tonight, the resolution would authorize bonds in an amount not to exceed $18,125,000. As Brian said, what we're trying to solve for is how much money do we need to put into an escrow account to pay off the prior bonds and to cover cost of issuance. That's what we're trying to solve for, is what's the cost of our project, is how much money do we need to actually put into an escrow fund. So what we're trying to gauge here with the par amount of the bonds is that determination. We authorize, there's a number of outstanding obligations that the city has. There's city issued bonds directly, the 2004s, 6s, 7s, and 12s that were issued for various improvements. And then also the building authority, which again is a financing vehicle of the city, actually has financed some facilities. The recreational facility was one of them. And some of those bonds are candidates for refunding also. So we include them within this resolution as possible refunding candidates if we can get to a level, like Brian had indicated, if there's a level of support that will provide the level of savings that the city is looking to achieve. The resolution also authorizes filing to the extent the city needs to with the Michigan Department of Treasury to get Treasury's approval, and also applying for municipal bond insurance, which we've talked about already, the purpose for why we might look at doing that. And then ultimately what it does is it authorizes the city manager and finance director to proceed with this transaction without coming back to council to the extent it's within the parameters that are set out in the resolution. So we establish parameters as to what we're looking for. When I say what we're looking for, I mean what council is looking for as to the parameters with respect to what authority that the authorized officers would have to actually execute the transaction, as long as it's within those parameters. The timing of the market is important here because we're trying to hit it at the right spot to achieve the greatest level of savings. So we do some delegation in the resolution so that we're not having to cycle into an exact meeting date, because once the rate gets set, the bondholders want to know, the underwriter wants to know almost immediately that they have a deal. They don't want to have to wait a couple days or a week or 2 weeks for a council meeting to approve that action. That's why the resolution would authorize the authorized officers to execute, sign a bond purchase agreement, as long as it's within the parameters that we put in the resolution. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot level of what the resolution provides. There's obviously a lot more details because it's about 10 pages, but we won't go into those details right now. We'll let Katie talk through a little bit of the schedule that we've got in place, the preliminary schedule for the financing transaction.
Yes, our schedule for the next couple months. Today, July 7th, City Council hopefully adopts the authorizing resolution. July 13th, we plan to apply for the bond rating. July 14th, the underwriters will have all their proposals submitted. July 27th, the preliminary official statement and bond documents will be in near final form. August 3rd, we should receive our bond rating. August 10th, we'll distribute the official statement to potential investors. August 17th, we'll sell refunding bonds to lock in an interest rate and savings. And then finally, on August 31st, close refunding bonds. So that's what we have right now for our schedule. And Tom and Brian, really great presentation. Thank you.
Hey, any questions from council? Are we going to do questions?
You can.
Through the chair,
Yes.
this is Councilman Moore. Can I speak on this?
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple of things here. Okay, so from what I gathered from this presentation is that you have assessed our bond portfolio for the city of Wayne, correct?
That's correct.
And then secondarily, you mentioned about those parameters that we would be automatically authorizing your company to go ahead and expedite when you're able to find the right fit for these bonds that we're trying to lower the interest rate on. My question is, how will we know what those parameters are that we're approving tonight?
The parameters that you're looking at would be in the resolution. That's going to be later in your agenda, and they're within certain paragraphs of the resolution. With the understanding, as I had mentioned earlier, is that one of the parameters is essentially Public Act 34, where there has to be net present value savings that we have to comply with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Wagner?
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure everyone here knows this. I just want to make sure everybody at home is clear. The only reason we would borrow money now is to pay off existing debt and to make payments at a lower interest rate. We're not putting on any new projects. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no new money.
Yeah, the resolution only authorizes issuance of bonds to refinance the existing debt. That's it.
Councilman Dowd?
Thank you, Mayor.
really good presentation. Thank you. Bond rating. I'm assuming you have an assumption of what our bond rating is right now. And I know that probably I'm answering the question, but interest rates also impacted by the bond rating.
Yeah, the bond rating will essentially drive what the rate of return or interest rate would be, with the interest rate necessary for an investor to buy. Yep, there's a correlation to that. So essentially, the higher the rating, the lower the interest rate. So there's an inverse relationship there.
So do we have, the last time we had a bond rating was 2012, I assume?
Right now, the city has two bond ratings, one by Standard & Poor's, which is in the triple B category. Moody's has a single B2, which is views as non-investment grade. So what we will be doing is talking to both of them here in the near future to talk about that. Both rating agencies are understanding the challenges that not only this city or any other city or state under COVID-19. I think there's a reluctance to, quote, downgrade anybody, because I think you're just, until you get some information to essentially do what you need to do, it's going to be taken into consideration, and we're going to have interesting conversations or good conversations with that. And we've been doing that here in the last 2 months with most of the rating agencies and our other clients.
If I can, one more question, because I outlined a number that we're going to target to finance, and would that number be inclusive of the fees or exception of the fee?
So in the resolution, the authorized amount not to exceed that was talked about 18.125, that would include the projected cost of issuance. So there would, yep, you're welcome.
Just to refresh, as Brian indicated earlier, when you're looking at the savings, the net present value savings, that factors in the cost of issuance too. So it's not just interest rate to interest rate, it also factors in the cost of actually issuing this new series of bonds.
Anybody else? So I think you guys kind of answered it, but did you feel that this is a good time for us now because of COVID, that we're going to be able to solve some problems because of this? Or it's hard to say still?
I had my crystal ball, I would not be here tonight. No, it's not. Actually, it's a very good question, because I think a lot of people are concerned that, essentially the credit markets or the fixed income markets, are they essentially working? And I would have to say it was very difficult in the month of March, as we essentially had canceled a lot of sealed bid sale. The market levels are essentially pre-COVID. So levels of interest rates today are at or below what we experienced prior to the pandemic, essentially here, the market's seizing up here in March. So the answer is yes. And as we keep seeing is that there is money, and if anything, with kind of like the repeat of what the Federal Reserve did back under the Great Recession, they essentially opened up the checkbook. The federal government, or essentially the Federal Reserve, is essentially helping to maintain liquidity, and that helps a lot. There is still people working. People are still putting money away, especially individuals, into retirement accounts. It may not be as much as they may have to, but there's still a demand for that. So the answer is yes. The whole thing about this negotiated sale is that we really want to see where those levels of savings are, and we want to make sure the resolution by authorizing the issuance doesn't require you to sell bonds at a loss or anything like that. It's just that we need to be in a position to have the authorization for you to essentially take advantage of the market when times are better. As it goes back to the schedule, a couple of things is that we look at. Right now, months of July and August, there's a lot of money coming back into the marketplace from prior obligations that were issued. They have an interest payment, or prior bond issues are being paid off. That money has to go somewhere. So then in the last week, when we scheduled a closing here in August, that's pretty much not a good week to sell anything. It's because normally people are sending their kids back to school, either to college or to back to the primary K-12 system. And then right after, if it's not right in August, we'll wait till after Labor Day. We just want to make sure that people are focused on the transaction. So timing and market acceptance is important.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys. Very informative.
And we can certainly wait for the resolution if you'd like. I'd be more than happy.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll put myself on mute.
Okay, Tina, we can go ahead and move the agenda.
Okay, item number 4, ordinances and amendments. Okay, first reading of ordinance 2020-04, provide and establish a process and procedure for the application and licensing requirement for medical marijuana facilities under the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act or recreational marijuana establishments under the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act within the city of Wayne, and to provide for the suspension and revocation for violations thereof.
Okay. Wish of council?
Motion to approve.
Okay,
I'm sorry, was that support, Councilman Webster?
Yes.
Thank you.
okay. Any questions on this?
Mayor, I have a question. Something brought to my attention that I want to bring to council. So in section 838.05 general requirements, C. So the very last part of that, on Sundays, we're only allowing them to be open from noonday, when facilities are allowed to be open from 9 to 5. So there's a concern there because it kind of gives a competitive edge over some of these other facilities. I think it would make more sense to allow them to have some of the same hours, as to not lose business to a surrounding community with a similar business. So I don't know what anybody else feels about that, but
You said there was 238 what?
838.05 general requirements.
Okay, that's the last number.
It's sections, it's
Yeah.
letter.
See,
What page, Jeremiah?
5.
Okay. That'll probably be easier.
Yeah, no, that's why I was trying to figure.
That's good.
Mayor Ricey,
Yes,
would it be all right if I kind of went through a few things here for you? Because I do have some
Sure.
information I need to give to you before you do vote that you need to be aware of before the second reading.
yep, sorry about that.
That's quite all right. Thank you. And Councilman Webster, I appreciate your comments. Obviously, some of our facilities have reached out to you and expressed their concern in regards to business that's down Michigan Avenue that's opening early. And it is good that we do have a competitive edge if we allow our businesses to open at the same time that other communities do, so we don't lose that traffic. But if I could please, Mayor, again, like I said, this is simply what we are doing is incorporating the MRTMA into, which is the adult use, into our current ordinance. I'm going to just briefly go through, if I can, and I did highlight in your packet and what was available online for the residents as well, what the significant notable changes were in the new ordinance versus the previous ordinance that was only for medical. And I will be quick. Medical marijuana establishment means a grower, safety compliance facility, processor, secured transport, retailer, which is also a provisioning center, but not a micro business. So we would not be allowing any micro businesses or smaller pop-up type businesses. The one thing you should know that we will not have any more than the current licensees that we have, the current locations that we have. What we have said is if somebody, and I'll give you an example because this is kind of confusing. A lot of people have asked me about this. So will other individuals be allowed to apply for a recreational license? Absolutely. However, if someone wants to apply to have a grow license, they must locate within the same location that already has a medical license within the city. So say, for example, when Pure Clouds builds on Van Born, he's working through all his construction right now. Let's say if he has a large facility, and this is not at all happening, I'm just giving you a scenario. Someone approaches that individual and says, hey, I'd like to become a partner with you. I already am pre-approved for adult use grow. I would like to see if there's an opportunity for me to operate a grow for recreational marijuana in your facility. Okay. That's the only way they could apply, that we could approve them. Okay. There will be no new locations for medical or recreational grow or any of the other license types. So that's how that will work. I do want to draw your attention to something that is going to definitely be different in your second reading. I'd like you to look at the top of page 4, 838.03. There was a section that was not put in, and that is grower under the MMFLA, which is the Medical Marijuana Facility Licensing Act. The reason why that needs to be in there is because Class C for a medical grow is 1,500 plants. Class C for a recreational grow is 2,000 plants. So when you get your second copy, if we move forward tonight, that's going to be different. It's going to be defined in there because it was left out. On page 6, I want to draw your attention, provisioning center, which you all know where sales are. We have Michigan Avenue, Van Born, and Cogswell. When recreational sales are operated out of that location under this ordinance, they're called retail locations or retailers. As far as the primary caregiver, there's been a lot of discussion about primary caregivers operating out of homes, things of that nature. A primary caregiver must own the facility, or be a family member. If someone is an occupant and not the property owner, they have to have permission from the property owner to grow in that facility. This applies to not only houses, but commercial or industrial buildings as well. This ordinance, we've spent a lot of time on this, as I mentioned to you before. The Planning Commission was very adamant about making sure that we get control of this. That is part of putting the no micro businesses in the ordinance and only allowing the current locations to contain recreational and medical. And I can take any questions, Mayor.
Do we have any questions from council?
Mayor Racy, to the chair.
Yes.
Ms. Going, I did ask you, and I appreciate you forwarding the current charter that we have in place, and we used that to compare what we are being proposed here tonight. But I did find some inconsistencies, and I'd like to share them with you. On page 2, number 15, is a new addition that was not highlighted in our packet proposal. And also on page 9, paragraph 3 has an addition of MRTMA, and paragraph C has an addition of MRTMA as well. Neither of these were highlighted. Also on page 10, city responsibility, paragraph C has an addition of MRTMA, and I think that's what you just spoke about. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember. Those items have to be added throughout. The MRTA is a new type of license. What I highlighted for you was not, if you notice, I know I said some of the changes. I didn't highlight every single change. I highlighted the items that are significant that you needed to know about.
Thank you. Furthermore, I have a question on page 3 about the license requirement. It is B, this facility or establishment shall not include a club, cafe, or any other design that permits consumption of medical marijuana at the faculty or the establishment. My question is, why is recreational marijuana not included in B? Are we going to allow consumption of recreational marijuana at a club, cafe, or other design or recreational faculty or establishment in the future?
So a facility is defined in your paragraphs under the MMFLA, or establishment is under the MRTMA. So it's defined in the first two words. So there's
Okay.
two things we're talking about. Facility is medical, establishment is recreational. So it is covered. Neither one shall allow those activities.
Okay. And then I have one last question. In general requirements on page 6, letter F, it states an approved site plan may be required showing the proposed building to be used, remodeled, or reconstructed along with the parking, landscaping, and lighting plans. The word may is a change from the existing ordinance that says shall. This sentence has or the word may was not highlighted in this proposed ordinance this evening. Why was this changed from shall to may?
This was changed because if the business already has a pre-approved site plan under medical, they will not need to submit that again under recreational. So we're not going to make them go through site plan approval again if it's already been approved. So we'll go back to pure clouds again. If he already has a site plan approved under medical, we are not going to make him go back through that if he decides he wants to do recreational. So not shall, it's may. And we will follow all rules and regulations regarding site plan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
No problem.
Anybody else?
Chair, I have a question. You said that for medical and medicinal for Class C, there was a difference in the plants allowed. Why is that? Why is it not the same?
You know, I'll be honest with you, I do not know. It's just how the two different ordinances were written at the state level. I don't know if Mr. Bosnick would know or not. I can get that answer for you, or he can get that answer for you if you don't know, Councilman.
Yeah.
If he doesn't know.
Yeah, just through the chair, that would be a good question for Mr. Hitchcock, who I did communicate with earlier, and he will be available for the final reading of this or any other questions that council may have in the interim.
Thank you, Mr. Bosnick.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes. Go, Tom.
Councilman Webster, and from what I've read, this was in the proposal that was voted on by the citizens of Michigan. Once it was passed, it takes a supermajority to change that in the legislature in Michigan. So why they changed the numbers, they changed a lot of different things, just like retail establishment instead of, the dispensary. They changed a lot of the verbiage and they changed numbers, but that was the law in essence that we voted yes on, or the citizens of Michigan voted yes on. So we have to live with those numbers being different. That's my understanding of it all.
Mayor Racy?
Yes.
I just wanted to just make sure that if there are going to be any changes this evening in regards to time, if you could, and Mr. Bosnick could instruct you that that would be part of what comes back in the second reading.
Okay. And if people have questions, I'd encourage them to contact Ms. Goen, and she can help them, in between these meetings if they've had other questions. Any other questions?
Mayor, if I may, just for clarification, Bosnick's office, have they looked at our first draft yet, or is this still yet to be gleaned by legal on Bosnick?
Through the chair, Mr. Hitchcock from our office is kind of the resident expert in this subject matter, and he's been working to craft this and put together the ordinance. Is that correct, Ms. Goen?
He put the ordinance together, he and Mr. Chubb.
Thank you.
And as I indicated, Steve will be available to attend the meeting of the second reading if you deem it that you want him here.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just have one, Mayor.
Mhm.
Since we've made all these changes, do we have to have the changes read, the new changes read twice, or will it just be included in the next reading and that'll be it?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. So the changes that are being made for the next reading, do we have to have like the complete thing as it will be passed read twice, or can we just make the changes and then will the changes be acceptable to be just made in the next reading and then passed?
Yes, we will make the changes and then you will vote on a final document, the second reading.
Yes, through the chair, some revision of the document is allowed, but you will have that in your packet well in advance of the second reading. So it would go from first reading to second reading, along with the minor modifications that were discussed at the table, at the council table this evening.
Mayor Racy, through the chair. Dennis, you brought up a good point there. And it makes me wonder is that, and I agree with what you're saying about when a facility that is medical also includes recreational, that they necessarily not need to need a site plan reviewed again. What I'm wondering is what that criteria might be and with whose authority would that be in making that decision? That is something I want to put out there to be considered before the next meeting of this reading.
I can answer that now if you'd like, Mayor.
Yes, please.
Please.
Okay, so again, if someone has already submitted a site plan and they're not making any revisions, there's no need for a new site plan to be approved. This will be Mr. Byton and I will work together on this. If they're making revisions to the site plan, then they would have to come back before the planning commission. So in other words, if they're not changing the footprint of what they've already submitted, they're not changing parking, they're not making any revisions, but maybe it's an interior revision, very small, that would be submitted in their construction plans to the department. So they have to submit plans or drawings to Mr. Byton for their approval still, but they don't have to go back through the planning commission.
Thank you.
Does that answer it?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Clarifies it much better.
Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff,
No.
Councilman Wagner,
No.
Councilman Dowd, Mayor Racy,
Yes.
motion carries.
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, are we incorporating the change in hours for the second reading?
I'm sorry, Lori, I didn't hear you.
I'm asking if we are incorporating the change in Sunday hours in the second reading.
I believe so. I think that this is just the first reading and then your final draft will,
Okay.
as Mr. Bosnick said, will be to the council well in advance.
Okay,
So then that will be read and approved.
okay, thank you all, and thank you all for the questions.
Through the mayor, through the chair. Don't we have to vote on that change? That change wasn't voted on by council. That's just something that Councilman Webster brought up, but it wasn't anything that we voted on.
That'd be a question for the city.
Mr. Bosnick. Mike?
Well, it would be, I suppose you could have be up to the council to decide if they're going to approve that as part of the second reading or not. So if the desire of the council is to not approve the ordinance with that change in hours then the motion would fail.
Do we need to do another motion?
I would
Just-
like
Are
to,
you-
Mayor, I would hate for the whole thing to fail just because someone had an issue with hours perhaps.
Correct.
Can we get a motion? Councilman Webster, do you want to make a motion? On your,
Motion to change the hours in section 838.05C from on Sundays from 12 to 8 to 9 to 8.
Repeat the hours that the change you want.
They're going from 12 to 8 to 9 to 8, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Support Dowd.
Okay. A motion by Councilman Webster, supported by Councilman Dowd. Motion is to change the hours in section 838.05, section, I'm sorry, that was page 5.
5, section C.
Subsection C, changing the hours from 12 to 8 to 9 to 8. Are you ready for the roll call?
yes, go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skeff,
No.
Councilman Wagner,
No.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Racy,
Yes.
motion carries. Section 5, number 5 on our agenda is appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. 5A, resignation of Terry Schenk from Wayne Housing Commission effective June 10th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Support Dowd.
We're gonna, and just so we don't have, nobody has to say this again, we're gonna, anybody who's resigning, we're gonna give them letters of appreciation. So I'm just making that upfront so everybody understands that. Any questions? Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skeff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Racy,
Yes.
motion carries. 5B is resignation of Quentin York from the Zoning Board of Appeals effective June 15th. Mr. York, this was due to him moving outside of the community.
Move to approve.
Support.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skeff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Racy,
Yes.
motion carries. 5C is resignation of Michael Smith from the Planning Commission effective June 15th, 2020. And this was due to not currently having the ability to commit to attending the meetings.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skeff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Racy,
Yes.
motion carries. 5D is appointment of Nicole Conklin of Phyllis Street to the Wayne Historical Commission for a 3-year term to expire July of 2023.
Move to approve.
Support.
Was that motion by Wagner, supported by Webster? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Any questions? Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Raisy.
Yes.
Motion carries. 5E, appointment of Susan Lee of First Street to the Wayne Housing Commission for a 5-year term to expire July of 2025.
Move to approve.
Support.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster, Councilwoman Skiff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Raisy.
Yes.
Motion carries. And 5F, appointment of Cynthia Adams of Edmund Street to the Wayne Cemetery Board for a 4-year term to expire 2024.
Move to approve.
Or Wagner.
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay. The one thing I'd like to see is if we, and I know the city clerk and I have talked about it after the elections to look at the different boards. But if we have these boards, I'd like to make sure that they're meeting and they're communicating with the people. I don't think that the cemetery board has met in a long, long time. Because I've talked to some of them and they haven't had any communication with the city. So I'd like to see something with that happen. But with that, roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Raisy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item 6 is general items. 6A is approval of the purchase and installation of BSNA server from IT Right. If approved, this purchase will be funded from the State of Michigan Technology Grant in the amount of $12,505.44 and the IT Capital Outlay Fund in the amount of $890.79.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm excited to bring this project to you tonight. This is the first item that will be taking advantage of the state technology grant that we were awarded. And I laid out as much information as I could in the memo, but I'll be happy to answer any questions if there's any.
Any questions from council?
Yes, Mayor, I just have one. I understand that, did you recognize me? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak out of turn. I guess I understand that they did not go out and get other bids because this is the company that has previously installed software and before. I guess I'm still just not comfortable with that. I was wondering possibly why that was decided not to do that.
Yeah, I can understand the concern. This is the only company that BSNA software recommends for providing a server and, more importantly, providing the migration from one server to another of their software. So if there was a problem with a different company, then BSNA is going to not really recognize that company as an authorized vendor.
I'm sorry, can I ask another question, Mayor?
Yes.
So does that mean that they're not guaranteeing or they won't warranty anything if we get another person to do it?
I can't say that they wouldn't warranty it. It's just one of these situations that you get into, well, that's not who we recommend.
They're not an authorized dealer.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff,
No.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Racy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item 6B, approval of the resolution for the temporary waiver of late property transfer affidavit fees.
Move to approve.
Support.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mayor Racy.
Joe, you have something?
Is there anything that the city manager can add to this one?
Not my item.
I think that, Jennifer Neiman Stamper may have called in case there was
She
questions.
is on the call.
Yes. Good evening, council, mayor. I hope everyone can hear me well.
Yes.
So according to the state of Michigan, MCL 21127, we are required, or actually a taxpayer who is purchasing property within the city is required to notify the assessor's office within 45 days that they have purchased property on a state approved form, which is currently the property transfer affidavit. If they fail to notify the assessor's office within 45 days, we are required to assess a $5 a day late fee up until $200 to that purchaser for failure to file timely. Due to the current pandemic with the COVID-19, we are asking that City Council waive that fee for a very limited period of time, essentially for the amount of time that City Hall was closed to the public. Therefore, we are requesting that the fee be waived between the dates of March 13th until July 23rd, which will be 45 days after we reopen to the public on June 8th. We are required by law to charge the fee. If we decide not to charge the fee, we have to have a city approved resolution requesting why we are temporarily waiving the fee. So that is what this resolution is requesting to do.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Racy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Six C, approval of resolution authorizing issuance of general obligation limited tax refunding bonds.
Move to approve.
Or
Is that
Katie?
Councilman Webster?
Yes.
Thank you.
Katie? Did you want to say anything?
Well, this is the resolution that we were talking about during the bond presentation. This will allow us to go and attempt to refund our bonds and have some savings.
Any questions from council? Okay, roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
yes.
Mayor Racy.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you guys for staying on the call with us. Yep, you too.
Item 6D, approval of the emergency repair of the Department of Public Works tree truck in the amount of $7,000 from Metro Airport Truck.
To approve.
Or
Okay. Any Is Ed on the phone or?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This is Ed Queen.
Ed,
Hey. Hey, yes, so the whole thing was that the transmission went out on this. As you can see, it's a 1997 High Ranger tree truck. But we had it out on a job and one of our employees was up in the air. You know, luckily he wasn't too high. It's actually a 60-foot reach on this truck, but he happened to be about 10 feet off the ground when the transmission went out on this truck. And so we had to use our other lift truck to get him out of the other tree truck. And the tree truck actually sat on the job for about 2 days before we could actually get it from Annapolis and Merriman because the stabilizers were down because of this transmission. So once we got the technicians out there to kind of look at it, we were able to get it to Metro Airport Truck, and they went ahead and repaired that transmission. So now we do have it; it's back already and repaired already here. But just something for you to think about, food for thought for in the future here. It is a 23-year-old truck that we're using. We do get it inspected annually by a company that comes out to make sure that safety-wise that the truck is still able to use the boom and everything else. But at some point down the road here in the future, not probably the near future, but you're looking at about $180,000 expense for a brand new truck with a boom lift for us to continue to do tree removals, tree trimming, and everything that comes in between there. So just something to think about. It's not anything I'm coming to right away with because of our current status with our finances. And this one is still working at this point, and we're having to put some money into it for repairs, but and it's still safe to use at this point, but just something to think about for the future.
any questions?
Yes. Does he have an estimation on what it would cost for a new one?
180,000.
Yeah, 180,000.
And he said near future. What does near future mean?
It's be down the road a little while. I would estimate, at least a couple of years, maybe.
So is that something you could start budgeting for within your trying to figure that out? I understand money where it's at.
All that money would be coming out of the general fund.
Right.
Because it's not a vehicle. Since it's a vehicle that's actually used for most of the work when it is completed by the employees. So any work that we do in the right of ways, which is from the 1 foot inside the sidewalk on either side of the road to the other side, any of that work comes out of our road budgets for that, but we cannot use our road budget or Act 51 money to purchase equipment, unlike, our water fund and sewer funds where we're able to use those for those types of purchases. So we're not able to do that. So that total dollar amount will actually come out of the general fund. So that's why I say it's, in the future, but down the road, depending on what our finances are, and right now we're still able to use the current one. But like I said, it's 23 years old already.
Thank you.
So will you get an antique plate for that in a few more years?
Yeah, for that piece and for most of the other pieces we have in our yard.
Okay. Councilman Wagner.
Thank you. I know we can't afford a $180,000 new truck right now, but if we put $7,000 into this truck and do a 23-year-old truck, are we going to have to put another $7,000 into it in 6 months? How is this truck worth keeping up at this point?
It is right now. Like I said, this was the first time that I think we've rebuilt the engine on it before. So our mechanic had done that years ago. Now it was just happened to be the transmission. Now that we had that rebuilt, the other parts of it, like I said, the boom is inspected annually. And they come out, there's a company that we have come out that inspects both of our lift trucks to make sure they're safe. But right at this point, that's hard to say. I mean, it's whether it's the tree truck or any other piece of equipment we have, yes, it's still worth it to keep it right now at this point. It's our only option. But at some point, like I said, down the road, we're going to need to invest into that scene, because we're labeled as, Tree City USA. And I know that everybody always likes to talk about, contracting this stuff out. We're contracting work out currently right now to try to assist us in that manner, just because of, like we always talk, the personnel and manpower and the finances sometimes dictate some of that. We're doing what we can on our end with the tree truck we have, and then the contractors assisting in some points, but at the same time, the contractors are just as busy. So it's not like where you can just get a contractor to come in and continually do that work for us.
Mayor AC?
Yes.
I would just add, so we'll be able to resume our tree trimming services and stump grinding services, because this truck has now been repaired.
That is correct. I mean, it's not at a scale that you would think that all of a sudden we're going to get into neighborhoods, because that does take a lot of work as well. That we have to, I always talk to you guys, all of you about that. We have to do little chunks of each portion of what we do here at the DPW. Currently we're working. We have a four-person crew working on a storm structure over there by Wayne Towers. One of the ones that we were looking at. So right now we don't have that work happening just right now. As soon as we complete that job, at some point in the future here, we'll be back to doing tree removals and trimming as well. But yeah, so we'll be doing it at some point here.
I did notice some trees already X'd. Are those anticipated to be removed within a month or so? Are we looking at that kind of a window?
We work it into our schedule as we can, but some of those might be X because we have the contractor maybe lined up or scheduled to remove those for us. Some of them might be a little bit, some that, if we get some that are in the wires or things like that, they're able to remove some of those that require that type of removal. So, and they have a bigger piece of equipment that actually is like a crane that grabs the limbs and things, and actually they can use a one-man person operation it has a saw on this thing, and they've had to shut down streets just to remove a tree, but it gets the job. But so some of those are slated by the contractor. Some might be for ones that we have scheduled to remove.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Mayor Racy,
Yes.
just a few more, please.
Yep.
I'm just assuming, of course, this the $7,000 will also be coming out of the general fund. Okay, and then just one last question again about the bids. Is there a reason why we only had one person bid this out, one company bid this out?
When it comes to something like this, of this nature, which is an emergency repair, we don't go and try to get bid it out. We use what we know to be that works for us, and like I have listed in there, the Wayne, City of Wayne fire trucks have been repaired at this location as well. Because when you get into the bigger trucks and things like that, a lot of times you have somebody that's already designated to do those repairs for you, and somebody that you trust. So we don't sit here and take the time to go out for bids while we're waiting for the truck to be repaired. That's a long process. We already have somebody lined up, so that we are working with. They came out, towed the truck for us to their facility, and then made those repairs.
We're essentially voting on something that's already been done without approval first.
Correct. That's what happens when we have an emergency repair. The equipment will always get sent out because we have to get that piece back as quickly as possible. Whether it's if we ever had a backhoe or our jet or anything like that, and so we'll get it repaired as quickly as possible, because in the most cases, just like when you take your own vehicle to a shop, even when you shop around, you're gonna be within, so many dollars of what the price is anyways for a certain repair. So,
the council has approved many emergency repairs. When we have to get vehicles, we have to get, we've done it for the fire department, fire vehicles, things like that. When it's a vehicle that is a necessity and critical, the administration does have the ability to use the emergency process in this.
correct. And you like the sweeper, we just had the sweeper several months ago when you approved that as well. We don't sit there and wait around. We have companies that are actually designated for that piece of equipment. It might be who we purchased it from as well. And we'll send that out to them because they're the best ones that know that piece of equipment. And so we did the sweeper just, several months ago. We had to have some major repairs done to that as well. And it gets completed. And then, yes, we, after the fact, come and say, we just, wanted you to know that we had to have these repairs done.
Any other questions? Okay. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter,
Yes.
Councilman Miller,
Yes.
Councilman Webster,
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff,
Yes.
Councilman Wagner,
Yes.
Councilman Dowd,
Yes.
Mayor Racy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 7, administration reports.
Through the chair.
Lisa? Yep.
All right, good evening, everybody. First of all, I want to thank Tom and Brian and Katie for the excellent presentation tonight. I know this was a lot of information for the council, but it was necessary. None of us had an ability, none of us were here when the prior bonding team was in place. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity, a one-on-one for all of us, actually, including the staff and the public, to better understand how the bonds work, how Brian's team works, how Miller Canfield with Tom fits into the picture. And I think that, to be honest with you, no, I don't think, I know that we've had more guidance in the last couple of months with Baird and Tom than we have had since I've been here, at least, and probably prior to that. The bond game is a very, there's a lot of moving pieces, there's a lot of moving parts. But what I was pleased to hear is the questions. It really was nice that it appeared council, and maybe I'm way off, but it appeared that everybody understood. And I think that the presentation was done quite well so that it was understandable. What I wanted them to do, even for me, was to make sure that it was at a level that everybody could understand and make sure that, it wasn't over our heads, because there is a lot of information that's over our heads. But I just want to thank the three of them. I thought it was excellent. Hi, Nolan. Katie is on the line under administration report. She just wants to give an update on taxes. Katie?
Hey, yeah, just some information on the summer 2020 taxes. I just want to let everyone know that the summer 2020 taxes are due and payable without interest July 1st through October 1st, 2020. Then on Friday, October 2nd, interest will begin to accrue at 0.5% per month. The last day to pay the 2020 taxes at the city will be Monday, March 1st, 2021. And then on Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021, the 2020 delinquent taxes would then need to be paid at the county if they weren't paid yet. So the tax bills were mailed out on July 1st. So you should be getting it soon if you haven't already. You can also access your tax bill online at thecityofwayne.com. We also have DivDat kiosks throughout southeastern Michigan where you can make payments. And of course, if you come to City Hall, we can print you off a copy as well. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. City Clerk, I didn't know if you had any updates today. We didn't get a chance to catch up. We were both so busy today. Did you have any updates on the election?
Thank you, Lisa. I just wanted to mention that I'm still and always looking for to recruit new election workers. So if you're interested, please stop in at the clerk's office during regular hours and pick up an application. We'd be glad to have you on board. to help with the election process. Also, it's not too late to get that absentee ballot. Stop in at the clerk's office. We can issue that ballot to you right over the counter. Just bring your picture ID. And also, you can track your ballot online, michigan.gov/vote. And I will put that link on my website, on my webpage, so that you can just link up there and track your ballot. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of updates. The first round of FEMA, we have 3 in. Katie and I have been working like crazy. We have 3 rounds in right now. Our first round that we submitted back in I think it was late March, early April, is just now under final review. And that's for about $27,000 out of the 37. So we're waiting to hear back. The final review team is the state. So it bounced from us to the feds, from the feds to the state, now the state back to us. So it's been a circle. So we're still 2 rounds behind after that. But we just submitted our 3rd round. I just worked on that last week with Katie. So I want to thank her for her help on that. Those are tedious. You have to do a whole lot of work, but it's well worth the money. One thing that's coming out, Katie and I are going to be on a call Thursday. There's a number of things that we're going to be asking through Treasury with this Senate bill that just came out, 690, that is focused on first responders, different reimbursements and things like that. And we're going to be focused on a number of things, but one of the things, just going back to the FEMA round, is we're going to apply for the 25% from each of the 3 rounds for reimbursement from the state, so that we don't lose that money. So Katie and I are going to be working on that and a couple of other items surrounding some of the first responders. So we'll be as soon as we get the direction on Thursday, the grant will be released, and then it's due on the 17th of July. So they're giving us a very short window to do this, but we're already preparing for what we need to. I've been in contact with Treasury, so we're going to do everything we can to get as much money back as we can that FEMA won't reimburse. And despite what has been said about them waiving that 25%, that never happened. 25% match. Just so you're aware, I emailed the council today. Your books for the study session will be available starting tomorrow morning at the clerk's office. They will not be delivered. It's really difficult for me to pull workers from DPW off of what they're trying to catch up with after COVID. So the only reason that we were doing deliveries was because City Hall was closed, but now the City Hall's open. We're going to have to ask that you make arrangements to pick up your book, and it's here, and then also to pick up your packets. If you only want a packet through email right now, let us know. That's fine. Just to confirm with the clerk, if you want a hard copy, please make arrangements with the clerk to pick them up. Right now, we only have 4 that requested hard copies, but I know because of the fact that we are open and you're not coming here to get them, we will make every arrangement with you possible to make sure that you get your information. But again, the books I'll be here tomorrow. I want to let you know that the judge and the court administrator will also receive a copy. They'll be in their mailbox tomorrow as well. Let's see. Mayor, if I may just make a suggestion. Oh, by the way, the study sessions is on July 13th, Monday, July 13th at 6 p.m. It'll be available via Zoom. That information is not in the books that I'm giving to all of you yet. The city clerk will make sure to send that information out, an agenda and the Zoom number later this week. And I do understand that'll be televised just like this. Mayor, if I may make a suggestion, I think it would be a good idea if I can just point out that there's a lot of background noise sometimes on these calls, on these Zoom calls, and since we're going to be stuck doing them for who knows how long, I think it would be a good idea if we could consider having each council member say their name when they are making a motion, like Councilman Dow does. And the reason I say is because if you hear the city clerk often has to say, "I'm sorry, who was that?" Because it's hard to hear. There's always a lot of background noise. So if I may recommend that, just for these Zoom meetings, I don't know what you're going to do when you're doing here, but as far as these, I think it would just make it easier for the city clerk to take accurate notes, because a lot of the men's voices sound the same, but also when you get a little bit of interference, I couldn't hear some of the names or some of the voices. So if I could just recommend that.
I just patented that.
Yes, you did, Dowd. But you have to go up to the screen and say, Dowd. Right? And the last thing I want to say is that, wow, Veterans Memorial is looking awesome. If you haven't been by City Hall, we do have the memorials up. The group did a fantastic job. We are now going to be working on the flagpole. Mike is working on that, Mike Biden, lighting. I also want to thank DPW for all of their hard work. It's been a big team effort on this so far. And the last thing I wanted to say is that we're in need of now 2 benches, because I won't disclose yet. We had a very generous donor, a family in Wayne, come forward and donate the first bench today. The benches are $750. It's a $100 discount from the company, but the reason that they are a little bit pricier is that they're very sturdy benches and they are weather resistant. We don't want to buy benches that we're going to have to keep replacing, benches that we can't bolt down. We are going to have to make sure that we put quality items into this, because they're going to be exposed to the elements year round. And so these are a little more costly, but they have a coating on them after researching that helps with the weather resistant issues, the rusting, things like that. So if anybody's interested in donating bench, we need 2 more. And we're trying to save the money in the account that we raised. We ended up raising $101,000, which is amazing. But with cement and all these other things, we're already down to about 53. So it's just, and the monuments. Yes.
Put me down for one.
Really? Wow. Thank you. That's awesome. We need 1 more. And if everyone wants to do trash can too, that's great. Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that very much. We're trying to save the money as much as we can, because I want to end up with also a maintenance fund for that area too. So we're trying to be very conservative with costs, but make it special. So I think that's it, Councilman. Thank you. And to the other donor, I know they're around. Thank you so much, and to your family. And that'll conclude my report this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Public comments for matters not on the agenda pursuant to the Michigan Open Meetings Act and the enacted procedures and rules of City Council. Now is time for public comment. Any questions will not be answered this evening, but the appropriate person will make their best effort to respond by the next council meeting or as soon as possible, provided you state or leave your contact information with the city clerk. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And Mayor, I did have one that called earlier today requesting for their question to be read. So if I may do that now. This was Mr. Vern Amos of Stellwagen Street. His question is, due to the Recreation Center being closed, are we continuing to pay $12,000 per month? And are we going to renew Ali Syed's contract in August? That was the only one I had. Thank you.
Is there anybody in the attendee area that have questions? If so, please raise your hand. Mr. Marcus, are you there?
Mayor, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, for this opportunity to be heard. Last month, as you know, I sent an email to the mayor and to the city council asking for a response on how to address Westwick Square Cooperative's garbage dumpster issue. And it was my expectation that someone would have gotten back with me, as was just announced in the process by the clerk, but I did not get a response from anyone. We are trying to find a way to have some type of public hearing and public comments with the council to allow the homeowners of Westwick Square to be heard on why it is, after 50 years, that the city is now demanding that garbage dumpsters be placed in their front yards and under their kitchen windows. You've already shifted tens of thousands of dollars, because you could, out of the city budget onto the backs of low and moderate income families by having them pay for their own garbage removal. We asked for a reasonable process to present information to council, and in some cases we were ignored, in some cases we were rejected. The city has not been forthcoming in providing the information that we've requested, some of which has gone through FOIA requests, which have either been ignored or only answered in part. And my representation of the 325 families that live in this community and the over 1,000 residents is significant, authorized, And quite frankly, it's not how communities ought to work together to resolve problems within the community. And it's starting to get to a tipping point whereby the families of this community are becoming anxious and nervous about this top-down dictate that causes them to have this massive change in their rubbish removal system. These disruptions in their way of residency in the community it's hard to manage, quite frankly. We're trying to do the best that we can to work with the city. We're asking for a reasonable process to work with the city to come to some mutual understanding and release of this demand that the garbage dumpsters be used to remove the garbage after 50 years. I personally have worked with prior city council members and prior city managers on this issue. I've been managing this co-op for 40 years. And we've had a great relationship. And the predecessor DPW director and city manager and I have worked hand in hand in the past to make sure that reasonable outcomes were achieved. And now we can't even get heard by council. And I don't understand why. And this is not how communities work with one another. We ask the council to sit down and discuss this matter with us intelligently, calmly, and with a common goal of reaching a conclusion that does not have to involve massive litigation. This matter is not going to go away. The community of Westwick is not going away. In fact, they're coming on stronger and stronger every day. They just want to be heard. We ask for your cooperation in this effort. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Jody.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council and everyone. Just a brief update on the library. We are still offering plaza pickup, which is going very well. You can put your items on hold either online or give us a call and set up a time to come pick them up just outside the doors, no contact pickup in Veterans Plaza. As of today, we've expanded the plaza pickup hours back to our regular hours of operation. So we're again offering services 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and noon until 5 p.m. Friday and Saturday. And finally, today we've also, I'm happy to announce, have started offering home delivery for any residents in the city of Wayne who are unable to leave their homes right now. They can contact the library and make arrangements for books to be delivered to them at home. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else in the attendee area have a question? Okay, go ahead and let's move the agenda.
Comments from members of City Council?
Councilwoman Skiff.
Good evening. I just have a few thoughts tonight. First of all, I just wanted to express my condolences to Tina and her family at the loss of her mother. I'm very sorry for your loss, and I'm keeping you in my prayers. And also for those who have lost family members and loved ones to the COVID virus. This continuing pandemic is always on my heart and mind, and just praying for the families in in our community, that everyone will stay well and safe. I also wanted to thank Tom Colas and Brian Leffler for the presentation tonight. It was very easy to understand. So I do thank them for that. Mayor, that was a great idea that you had. I wish we could have gotten that visual up. I think that would have really helped members in the community also to grasp it a little bit, better. It's always better with a visual. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that, but it was a great idea. Maybe next time we do something like this, we can, if we're still on Zoom, we can try and do a trial run before that or something. I also just wanted to thank those who have resigned either a board or commission tonight for their service to our community and their time. Your time is precious. Everyone's time is precious. And I just want to thank you for using some of your time to serve your community. I really appreciate that. And all those who are either new to a board or a commission or are continuing to do it. Also, thank you for your commitment to our community as well. Wanted to remind everybody that the fireworks times that you can do let off fireworks is officially over. So, if we could just adhere to the law of Michigan and the that we are no longer supposed to be letting off fireworks for the 4th of July anymore. I'm sure your neighbors would appreciate it. I personally can sleep through anything, so it doesn't affect me, but I know I have heard several complaints and gotten telephone calls from people that it does. So please just be respectful and considerate of your neighbors at this time and adhere to our current laws. I'm sure everyone would appreciate it. Just a few words on my no votes tonight. I'm not opposed to necessarily any item that we're looking to have the money spent on tonight being spent. I really do like to see other bids. I understand that that was the company that was recommended by the software company, but still, if it's not going to affect our warranty, I guess I still like to see it. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that I would end up disapproving of anyway. I just like to see them. I like to know that we're getting the best deal that we can, and that's all. And I think also everybody knows where I stand with the amendment to the ordinance. Again, anytime I look at an item like this, I have to ask myself, is this going to be beneficial to the families in our community? And is it something that is going to be in our best interest? My answer to that question is still no. I understand the reasoning behind it, so I'm not angry or mad at anybody about it. I understand what they're trying to do and the goal that they're trying to accomplish in amending the ordinance. I just, in principle, I can't vote yes on it. So that's it for this evening. Thank you for listening to my thoughts and comments, and we see each other at study session or in the next city council meeting. We'll see you then. Thanks.
Okay. It's mixed up on the agenda. We should have done the consent calendar. Can we do this consent calendar and then I'll continue with the comments? Can I get a motion?
Let me just read. Sorry about that. I actually got that out of order. The consent calendar, the items under that is the Wayne Housing Commission minutes of May 13th and the Wayne Historical Commission minutes of January 13th.
Motion to approve without exception.
Support. Second, Wagner.
Any questions? Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Porter?
Yes.
Councilman Miller?
Yes.
Councilman Webster?
Yes.
Councilwoman Skiff?
Yes.
Councilman Wagner?
Yes.
Councilman Dowd? Mayor Racy?
Yes.
Motion carries, and again, my apologies for that mix-up.
Okay. Councilman Dowd?
Is his mic off?
You got your mic off still.
Better. probably never sounded better.
Yeah.
First off, I want to say that I think Mr. Queen's new stump grinder has been tested thoroughly. It made a visit to Chamberlain Street, and I think it took out got to be 8 foot in diameter, wouldn't you think? I think trees, and which was nice to see that they're gone. Looked like it was a quick job, even though the stumps were probably had to have been 40, 50 years old. Also, I want to thank our presenters on the bond outline. I think that was fantastic. I think it was informative, and hopefully we can get the presentation to the public to support what we went through tonight. I am very, very excited about buying a bench for the memorial. The memorial is looking fantastic. It's almost like I'm already seeing it, and I'm thinking it needs to get bigger. It needs something else. So with that, I'm very pleased to step forward and offer to buy a bench on behalf of the city. And lastly, I just want to say, on behalf of this household, Tina, my sincerest condolences.
Yeah.
With that, I'll pass.
Councilman Miller.
Thank you, Mayor Racy. First of all, I want to thank the administration for being proactive in addressing these bonds. It's been a long time coming, quite frankly, and I'm glad to see us starting to review these bonds and trying to save us as taxpayers money on this. Also, I want to, we need to all work together here with this COVID-19 and safety in our community. We have activities going on in our community, but I just ask that everybody continue to practice safety measures that will help protect themselves and protect everybody else along with them. Also, we have a heat wave going on, obviously. I would ask everyone to make sure you're checking on elders in your neighborhood, and also don't forget about the pets. You know, it gets pretty hot out there too for them. And I also want to extend my condolences to Tina. I hear you. I feel your pain. And my prayers are with you and your family. Lastly, I wanted to mention was the US 12 cruises this weekend. And I would just continue to ask everyone to enjoy it, but enjoy it safely. And I mean by safely is because of the pandemic situation that we are living with. We need to be able to stay safe, and we got to work together to get our economy back and jobs back. And that's why I mean by we have to work together on this to make this happen. We can't be divided about this pandemic. We need to work together because we all want to get our economy back. We all want to get some normalcy back, and we all want to get our people and businesses back operating. So I can't stress that enough, that we need to put aside our differences, whatever they are, and we need to work together to overcome this pandemic that we are, that is so detrimental to us all. With that, I will pass.
Okay. Councilman Wagner.
Thank you. Again, I'll just reiterate, Tina, our sincerest condolences for the loss of your mother. As I said before, I don't believe I haven't experienced it yet, but I've heard you never do get over the loss of your parents. So we're with you. Want to thank everyone who came to the park cleanup at Siventon Park a couple of Saturdays ago. It was a pretty good show up, and hopefully everyone comes back to the next park cleanup. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councilman Webster. The July 18th at the Mill Trail and Dynamite Park. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So we'll be there 9 a.m. and that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Councilman Webster?
Just to reiterate what Councilman Wagner just said, the next park cleanup is July 18th, 9 to noon. We're going to be doing Mill Trail and Dynamite Park. For those that don't know, Dynamite Park is located at 3347 Josephine. That's where we're going to be meeting up and starting. Civitan was a lot of work. There was a lot of weeds growing up through the basketball court and other places, but we hit it pretty hard and got it all up. So I appreciate everyone that came out. Pretty much the whole committee was there, so we appreciate everyone else in addition that came. I got to see the Veterans Memorial Post today. It is gorgeous. Please take the time to go see it. It was a wonderful job done by everyone involved. So thank you, Tina. I mean, everyone's already said it, but sorry about the loss of your mom. It was a very beautiful viewing and service. So he will be missed. And with that, I will pass.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Tina, our deepest sympathies from our family. Couldn't make it to your service for your mother, but I think you'll understand why. This is something that I really don't want to do. But so many of you have asked myself and others about my health. I can tell you that I'm diagnosed with lymphoma cancer. I'm not going into it any further. Sorry, it's very emotional yet. Any further than to say the treatment has been put on hold for now, just today, because I have other health issues that won't allow me to go into chemo. Hopefully we'll get these issues taken care of in short order and proceed to cancer treatment. So I'm speaking on this tonight because I feel that my constituents have a need to know about anything that could affect my meeting attendance and my decisions on council. At this time, I feel I can continue my duties as a council person. If at any time I or others feel I cannot perform the duties, I will resign. Thank you all for your prayers and concerns, and our family's fighting it. We're all working as hard as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I want to first also give my sympathy to your family, Tina. We're very, I know it's hard, and I thank you for everything that you've gone through, and I know your mom is greatly missed. So from Natalie and I, we want to extend our sympathy to you. I just want to ask people to continue that have known to continue to pray for our Mayor Pro Tem. It's just been some tough news that we're all praying for you, and want you to know that whatever you need, please contact any of us. I was hoping for that things were going to be better than we've been talking about this for a while, and I just want to say this is another result of COVID, where people can't get in to see the doctors like they should have been able to, and this really it's not cool, and it's affected a lot of people, and I know that Tom's not the only person that's experienced having to deal with this kind of thing. But Tom, I'm praying for you. My family's praying for you, and I would ask tonight that our community would be praying for you in the days ahead, and that you will be healed from this. So with that, could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Art Webster.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Have a great night.